Your voice, your opinion, your community. Fact TV, free speech protected.
Hello, and welcome to The Art of Being Human. I'm going to start a series on drug addiction, and I'm going to add to it suicidology, because I'm a specialist in it, depression, and that kind of thing. And the reason I'm doing it this way is that they seem to occur together. The drug use in this country is ridiculously high, and the suicide rate is very high, much higher than we've ever seen it before. We used to say that suicide was the second most common death of teenagers, and it is now for adults as well. So we do have a very, very high rate of suicide, a very, very high rate of drug use, and sometimes they combine together. So I've decided that instead of teaching all of them separately, which is what I used to do when I had classes on it, I would put them all together. But we are going to discuss today the way that people get hooked on drugs. Most people who take drugs, they don't ever expect to be hooked on it. They don't ever expect to have an addiction. They're doing it for other reasons. Now, for young people, the reason that they use drugs is sometimes just plain curiosity, with the belief that they will never get addicted because they're so cool and they're so good and they can resist it, and they're going to know when addiction occurs and they're going to be able to stop it in time. They just want the pleasure of taking the drugs. For a lot of other people, it's for pain control. We know that marijuana is very good in some cases for pain control, or they're uncomfortable, or they're depressed for some reason, and they just want to feel better, so they start taking drugs. What they don't understand is that if you start taking anything on a regular basis that's a drug, then you eventually will probably get hooked on it and have an addiction problem. Now, what I'm going to talk about is the progression of that. And it's not just the drugs. We're talking about alcohol, who you could say that's a drug as well. And people could get addicted to all kinds of things that you wouldn't even expect them to. I heard about a lady that was addicted to lettuce. There's nothing in lettuce that would cause you to be addicted, but some of these addictions are psychological and some of them are real physical. The drugs that we will be going into, the harder drugs, are really physical, and when the brain changes, you cannot live without them. But there is a progression for that, and I want to get into that progression today. Also, some people are addicted to shopping. Some people are addicted to eating. All they think about is what they're going to eat next and where they're going to eat and what it's going to be. You could be addicted for a lot of different reasons. And sometimes it has a physical base and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes a person will be using drugs and they get addicted to the drugs, never understanding, never foreseeing it coming. Oh, we can do this. I can take this drug. I feel good. I can take this drink. And when I'm finished, I feel good, and I'm just like I was before. What they don't see is the changes that are happening in the brain. The brain gets so adapted to what they're drinking or what they're eating or whatever they're addicted to. They don't see the addiction happening. The only thing they see is they feel better when they're on it. But then after a period of time, they need more and more and more to achieve that same level of feeling good. So I want to get into that. Suicide and right now it's going to be more drugs than anything else. So if we go into a progression of what happens in addiction, the first thing is that you try it. You try it for for whatever reason. You make a decision. You make a decision to take the drug. That's an important first step. And you know, we talk about suicide, and they say, well, people who are who do suicide are mentally ill, but they start off the same way. It's a decision, and it's a rational decision. I am going to use this drug because, you know, I don't feel well, I hurt too much, I have pain, I'm too uncomfortable, I'm depressed. I'm going to see if these drugs work. So you start to take the drugs. And this would be the same with alcohol. And now if you take the drug, what happens is that for a while you feel better. You really do. You were depressed, now you're not so depressed. You feel better. And so you go on for a while and you don't see any addiction coming because you're taking it, you feel good for a series of hours, and then when you get off the drug or when it goes away, the effects go away, you go back to being like you were before. So you start to feel really secure and safe in taking the drug. You took it, you feel better for maybe 4 or 5 hours, maybe a whole day, and so when the drug wears off, you go back to being what you were before. You do not notice any changes in yourself. Oh, this felt good, I guess I'll keep doing it because it makes me feel good, and I'm really the same person. You don't see me acting like I'm in a drug state. You don't see me acting like I'm addicted, and so they feel comfortable with the drug and comfortable that they will have the right to take the drug and not have any problems with it. After that period of time, for however long it lasts, then you start seeing that you don't feel quite as good as you did. Well, maybe a little more. So you take a little more, you achieve the same kind of comfort as you did before, you go back to being normal again when the effects of the drug wears off. And you feel safe with that. And so it goes on and on. And so eventually you need to take even more. Well, what's a little bit more going to do? I'm fine when the drug wears off, so I'll take a little bit more. So you increase the dosage, and you increase the dosage. And then eventually what happens is you start not feeling good. And not only does it not work, even if you take extra, then you have to have it. And eventually you really have to have it. If you don't have it, you are sick all the time. You have body pain, you have fevers, you have chills. It's like the flu 10 times over, and you don't know what to do. But by now you are addicted. What has happened during all of this time with this progression that I'm talking about? When you first started taking the pills or started taking whatever drugs it was, you felt great and it wore off and you were back to normal. But all that time that you were doing that, there were subtle changes going on in your brain, and your brain starts to get so that it doesn't function well without that drug, which now it needs in order to function. So eventually you don't feel good. You're sick if you don't take the drug, and the purpose of getting the drug is to stop the symptoms, which you didn't have to begin with because you were just enjoying being all right with it. But then your brain started to change, and your brain required it. Your brain got used to it. Some of these drugs are very similar as the serotonin and other chemicals that are in the brain, so the brain can get mixed up. And it's like something that's naturally occurring in the brain, even though it's not. And the brain gets mixed up, and the brain makes accommodations to allow itself to function with the drug, because the drug is so much like whatever it's producing naturally anyway. So that's how the addiction proceeds. It proceeds that the brain is making changes. The brain is actually getting used to the drug. The brain wants the drug. And then you go from enjoying it and wanting it just because you do, and then needing it. That point of the addiction, as far as I'm concerned, is when you stop when you stop enjoying it, and when you don't just want it, but now you need it. You have to have it. Why do you have to have it? Because your brain is not going to function normally without it. Now you're hooked. You didn't see it coming because all the time you were using it, you were feeling okay. But suddenly, you started not feeling okay. Suddenly, you had to have that drug in order to achieve any comfort at all. And then the drug kind of took over the brain, and then you have all kinds of physical symptoms. As one person put it with the drug addiction, at first, I thought I was going to die. And then she said, then I was afraid I was not going to die because I wanted to. And then the drug completely takes over. The brain will not function well without it. The brain structures have changed. It's slowly at first, but it happens, and then you suddenly realize you have to have that drug. If you don't have that drug, you can't function normally. So it's a progression, and it would be the same with alcohol. And it doesn't matter what drug you're taking, if it's a hard drug or if it's a drug that's not so hard, heroin, all of those drugs, and the other drugs that you're taking, the progression is going to be the same. With alcohol, it's going to be the same. Yes, I drink alcohol, it makes me feel good, and then I go back to normal. Then after a while, it takes a little more alcohol to get that feeling I need. Then it takes a little more. All the time that is going on, there is the structures in the brain that are changing. And it gets to the point where the brain has to have it. And you didn't see it coming because it came on slowly enough that you didn't really notice it. But there it is now. Oh, I have to have that drug. I have to have that alcohol. And then it starts to ruin your life and take over. All this because of a change in the way that the brain functions. Getting used to it and then going from getting used to it to needing it, or you're not going to feel good. So in the end, when you are an alcoholic or an end-stage drug user, it's like you can't stand not having it. And if you don't have it, you get terrible, terrible symptoms. To go off a drug can give you terrible, terrible symptoms. And you may need help with that, and you may need to go to meetings. You may have to have medication to take the symptoms away, but it kind of hits you like a ton of brick. You weren't addicted before. You were doing fine before, and suddenly the brain has changed enough so that the brain now requires the drug to function. And that's when you are an addict. And that's how it goes, no matter whether it's alcohol or drugs. So that's what happens. So you have the drug is actually gradually going to take over your mind. Now, what can you do to stop it? Well, the best way to stop it is not to get going to begin with. I guess I have time to tell you a story about myself. I'm not addicted or anything, but just to give you an example, I had to go to a doctor. I was in some pain, and they gave me a medication called Darvon Comp. I took a pill, and boy, I felt terrific. The world was a wonderful place. It couldn't be any better. I was just so happy. Nothing could possibly go wrong, and I knew at that point, that's the drug speaking, that's not me speaking. Because when you take medication to get pain relief, it takes the pain away, but it doesn't give you that added psychological effect of, I'm out in space somewhere and everything's terrific and I want to be on it. So I knew that right then, that was going to be a dangerous drug for me to take. I tried it one more time because I wanted to see if I would get the same reaction as the first time. And wouldn't you know, the reaction was the same. I was so good. I was so happy. You know, everything was just wonderful. And I knew at that point, I have to stop taking it. Now, some people, and I did, I got rid of it, and I haven't had any since, so I never got addicted. I never gave myself the chance. But I knew when I started feeling so good why people get addicted to drugs. They feel so good. They want that good feeling to continue. So what they want to do is take enough drugs to get that to continue. But what's happening? The drug is affecting brain function, and if I kept on it, which I knew I wasn't going to do, but if I had kept on it and I got more and and more and more, at some point I would have to have that drug in order to be a normal person, because I would have to feed that addiction in order to be able to live my life, and I would be addicted. So 2 doses of that medication, and it was gone. I got rid of it. I don't remember how I got rid of it. So I knew that at that point, if I continued with it, I would have an addiction problem with it. So a lot of people kind of get hung up with that. Well, I think our time is just about out, so I'm going to close it here, and we'll continue with this next time. Thank you for watching.